Okay folks, we're going to try this again. I completely screwed up the video the first time because I forgot to turn on the damn microphone. So there was a whole lot of me talking and no friggin' sound. Okay, so I'm going to get into the Snyder Core System from the Ironwill Outfitters. And I'm not going to belabor this too much because both Aron Snyder himself and Bill Vanderheyden from Ironwill have both produced videos about how to do it, how to put them in, how to use this hot melt glue stuff and whatever else. I'm just going to give you some tips that I have learned from not only using this system but a few other technical things with regard to the shafts. Lola, no, knock it off. Stop. Go. Go. Black Lab, 2 years old. Okay, so here's the deal. I shoot a Prime Nexus 4 at 80 pounds, 28 inches of draw length. That's a fairly formidable system. I've been shooting 80 pounds for about 2.5 years, 3 years now, and I'm very comfortable at that, and I shoot it with a hinge. And I have gone back and forth between different arrow shafts. In some of my previous videos, if you've watched some of them, I describe a lot of this in those videos. How I get away with using a lighter spined shaft with heavier poundage and I guess what would be considered moderately heavy point weight. So again, for this year, I'm shooting the Easton Procomp in a 340 spine. I am able to get away with shooting a 340 spine at 80 pounds and 225 grains of point weight because of the design of the Snyder Core System. They have built upon the benefits of the Valkyrie system with the center pin shaft and actually made it even better. And this is exactly why and how I am able to shoot a 340 spine shaft out of an 80-pound bow at 28 inches. So here's the deal. So I've been shooting Ironwill for the last this will be the second season I've been shooting Ironwill. Prior to that I shot cars driving by my house. I don't understand it. Prior to that I was shooting the Valkyrie system almost exclusively, and before that the Cutthroat system and from RMS, and I really like all three of them, but I've kind of settled on the Ironwill system as being the most versatile all-around component system, broadhead and point that I can find. So last year I shot the standard Ironwill field point and broadhead with a 50 grain insert and a 25 grain, a 10 grain footer or sleeve as Bill calls them. So 210 grains total point weight then. Now with the Snyder Core System and the system I was using last year from Ironwill with a micro diameter shaft like the Easton Procomp, that means you're kind of a slave to the Deep 6 system, insert system from Easton. With that 150 grain standard point from Ironwill and a 50 grain Deep 6 insert, the length of the shaft, or the length of the tail of the broadhead that went inside the shaft from the point itself all the way to the end was 1 3/4 inches. This year I'm shooting the Snyder Core System again. This time I'm using a 200 grain point, a 15 grain titanium Deep 6 insert, and a 10 grain titanium footer for a total of 225. The big deal with this is when I screw this Deep 6 insert onto the Snyder Core point, what I get is 2.5 inches. 2.5 inches of tail that goes inside the shaft, the arrow shaft. 2.5 inches that don't flex and aren't subject to the actual spine value of the shaft itself. Effectively, now keep in mind, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a physicist, I am not an engineer of any kind. I'm just kind of a regular dude, and this makes sense to me. This seems logical to me. So if I'm putting 2.5 inches of metal inside a flexible shaft, then that front 2.5 inches no longer contribute to the effective flexibility of that shaft any longer. So what I have done is, when I use Archer's Advantage on my phone, the archery software on my phone, to work out things like spine and overall weight and grains per inch and all those other little nuggets of info that we're all kind of obsessing over, the value for the shaft length that I'm putting in there is what I cut my shaft at minus 2.5 inches. And then I've played with, like, how long of a shaft do I need to get everything to spine out correctly for my point weight and my draw weight. And what I've settled on, what I've determined, is that if I cut my arrow shaft at 27 inches and then use the Snyder Core System for an effective shaft length of 24.5 inches, yes, 24.5 inches, that shaft length combined with this point weight combined with my draw length and draw weight gives me a total arrow of 511 grains that spines out damn near perfectly and is shooting like lights out right now. So that's how I get away with shooting heavy poundage bow, I guess average-ish draw length, and a shaft spine that is weaker than what I should be shooting. Right, I should be shooting a 300 spine, and maybe that's what I still should be shooting. But I can't argue with the results, like with not only the accuracy that I'm getting out of this combination, but also the reasonably good speed. I'm in the mid 270s with this, and all the other numbers that count. Momentum counts, total weight counts. I'm shooting them with, or I'm fletching them with a 5.5 inch wrap and 4 3-inch vanes, plus a nocturnal. And this puts my, again, for the number crunchers, total overall weight is 511 grains. My FOC is hovering right around 17.5 to 18%, which is about perfect for what I've experienced. I've built arrows that were well over 20% in the 23% range, and then I've built them as low as maybe 12 or 13%. And I have found that for me, what I have found is that 18% mark, give or take maybe 1 or 2% on either side, seems to be like a sweet spot for me. Other folks are talking like 13 to 16%. Other folks don't give a damn. Other folks are pushing it all the way up to 30%. Well, you know, whatever. It's honestly, it's whatever, I guess, floats your boat. And this, you know, what it's about is trust and confidence. Okay, that's what it boils down to. If I have trust and confidence in what I've built, in what I'm shooting, and how I'm shooting, in the practice I put in the research and the study time I put in, well, all those things, confidence and trust is what makes you a better hunter. I mean, it's like camouflage is the same way, right? Nobody's really building or designing camouflage for the animal. Like, the animal sees what it sees, and I'm sure I know there's some science involved in it, but let's face it, all the camo patterns out there and all the cool clothes and all that stuff are built for the hunter. And there's validity to that. Like, there's value to that. If what you're wearing makes you feel more confident, then you're going to perform better. That's just human nature, right? That's like science. Anyway, so yeah, I get a 2.5 inch tail shaft or tail off of this Snyder Core broadhead. Again, 200 grain point, 15 grain deep 6 titanium insert, gives me 2.5 inches inside that shaft, inside that arrow shaft. So when I do my calculations, when I input my numbers into the software, I'm not including that 2.5 inches when it comes to does my arrow spine out correctly. So for a 27-inch shaft, I'm inputting 24.5 inches as my arrow length, as my shaft length, and then adding 200 grain point, 25 grain total components. As the point weight, add the wrap and the vanes and the lighted nock, and that gives me optimum spine. It's actually favoring the strong end of optimum spine. These Procomp shafts have an aluminum insert, an aluminum core, and then it's wrapped in carbon. It's like a perfected version of the Easton ACC, which I really liked back when they were produced. They're hard to find now, and I'm tired of digging for them, and I like the micro diameter shafts anyways. So this is kind of the next evolutionary step in the ACC. When I cut these, I always take this small little file, so it's just a flat file that comes to a point, and I will run that file inside the arrow shaft and give it a spin just to kind of deburr the interior edge where the aluminum is, because when I put it through my arrow saw, it leaves a nice burr on the inside, and that tends to fuck with me trying to put everything together. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and glue these up. So I have found that with this glue, hot melt glue, I use this glue gun and I heat the glue surface first, and then I just dab the part that goes into the shaft onto the glue. I coat it with that. I'll show you the process. And then I press it in there and I spin test it. So let's go ahead and do that now, and then I have some comments about hot melt after that. This heat gun is it's a Bauer from Harbor Freight. It was inexpensive, economical. It does the job I need it to do, which is just melt stuff like this. I recently used it on my valve cover for the engine that I'm building in the garage. It's in front of me off camera. I use it on the valve cover to dry the wrinkle paint that I bought, and it was pretty cool to watch the heat bring that wrinkle out like before your eyes, because normally that wrinkle paint does that by just drying, and but you can speed up the process by shooting it with a heat gun. Anyway, so okay, I get some glue on there. I'm going to put the footer onto the shaft first. I've gotten away from epoxying like the footer on there because it allows me to swap components around if I need to without having to potentially damage the carbon of the arrow by heating it up with a torch. So I just run it over. I run this hot melt over the heat gun just to kind of even out what's on there and let it flow, kind of evenly coat the whole thing, and then it's just a matter of pressing that bad boy right in, and there it goes. Take a rag here and I'll wipe off this excess. Make sure it's seated all the way. Turn this damn thing off because it's noisy. And that thing spins flawlessly, like it's not even moving. It doesn't even look like it's whatever. It's spinning perfectly. So here's the one thing I'm going to say about hot melt. I live here in Phoenix, Arizona. It's hot as balls right now. It is almost 8 o'clock and we are still well over 100 degrees. It's the monsoon season, so it's very humid. So you southern folks are probably laughing your asses off at me sweating like this, but yeah, it's a dry heat right up until it isn't, and then the wet heat kind of whoops all of our asses here in Arizona. So be that as it may, the point is though the ambient temperature, and I've had issues in the past with hot melt or cold melt or some whatever melt glue, something other than super glue or epoxy. I've had an issue with them and their durability when the ambient temperature, like during the daytime, is say 110 plus, and then you combine that ambient temperature, which is turning this into that same temperature, or roughly. So you're combining that ambient temperature with the frictional heat that I'm getting when this arrow strikes a foam target, dense foam, which holds heat really fucking well. So you're creating all this heat generated by the friction of this arrow penetrating that foam target, and then it's just sitting inside there baking. Well, I've had times when I've pulled an arrow shaft out of a foam target and left the point behind because it melted the glue, and I had no adhesion, and of course it just left the point in the target. That's super frustrating. That's like maddening. I've actually gone ham on a fucking foam target before and just chopped that thing up into a million pieces trying to find the broadhead or the field point or the component system like this, which isn't cheap. I mean, none of this stuff is inexpensive. I mean, you get what you pay for, but that also means like you don't leave that shit in targets when it pulls out. I mean, it shouldn't in the first place, right? But if you're using hot melt glue and you live in a high temperature environment, just understand that this is a possibility. So when you're initially testing your stuff, maybe find an indoor range or do it early enough in the season where you don't have those high ambient temperatures outside, and you're able to flight test your broadheads at distance, which you usually can't do indoors without the risk of them pulling out inside of a target. So if you're dedicated to the hot melt glue, just keep that point in mind. I think that's gonna about do it for me for this video. I remember to turn the damn microphone on this time. It is still hot in here, but it's cooler than it was this afternoon when I shot it the first time and my camera was overheating. But yeah, if you're trying out this Snyder Core System, there are some advantages to it beyond like the obvious for Ironwill, like the superior materials, the superior edge retention, and sharp, like the level of sharpness straight from the factory, the durability of the steel that they use, the endorsement of guys like Aron Snyder, and a host of others, which, you know, this system takes nothing away from Valkyrie Archery. That's another company that I've used extensively, and I still am in love with those broadheads. Enough so that when I go in the field to hunt, I'm usually carrying in a 5-arrow quiver 3 of these Ironwills and 2 Valkyries, just because I have a lot of confidence and have had good experiences with those broadheads. But regardless of what you choose, look for these advantages, all right, that make a difference, and don't just slap something together and think it's good, because you might wind up with less than what you could have or more than what you really want. In other words, if I put this point system in, say, a 300 spine shaft, I'd be way over spined. I'd be way over spined, especially with the fact that I cut my arrow shafts traditionally pretty short. This is the longest arrow shaft I've shot in years, because I'm generally cutting the shaft all the way back to the arrow rest, to where I get no interference with the point or the footer, but it's right up against that friggin' arrow rest. So anytime you do that, you're increasing the spine of the shaft. Anytime you're cutting it below 28 inches, which is where the spine is actually measured, that's the length at which spine is measured. When you get below 28 inches on your arrow shaft, you're increasing spine by quite a bit. So keep those things in mind. I'm using that to my advantage with this, by having a shorter shaft give me the spine I need with a lower spined arrow, a lower spine shaft, and the point weight. Like I'm making up for that by cutting it shorter, and by reducing the effective length of the shaft. I hope this makes sense. If it doesn't, if I'm doing something wrong, if my logic is not sound, or if I'm just kind of talking out my ass, please give me some feedback. Because again, I'm not a scientist, I'm not an engineer, I have no background in that. This just kind of seems to make sense to me and is logical to me. And so I'm trying it, and what I'm seeing on the range seems to be proving my theory, my hypothesis. So, but if I'm way off base, I'd rather know about it. Now, if this works and defies something, then I'm probably going to keep shooting it. But I'd rather be educated and know than make assumptions, which is kind of what I'm doing. I'm just backing up my assumptions with actually shooting them and seeing how they fly and how they perform. And like I said, thus far, I'm super satisfied, very impressed. Anyway, yeah, so leave a comment or shoot me an email. Actually, that's even better, the email thing. So it's jeff@deaddriftconsulting.com. The Instagram page is deaddriftconsulting_LLC, and that's also the website, deaddriftconsulting.com. All right, thank you for watching, and I appreciate your support, and leave me some feedback. Okay, thanks guys, have a great night.